have to put up chairs and put up chairs and put up more chairs and have a full house. I guess you'd call that success. Yeah. So I want to welcome you to History at High Noon on this nice day in April. I know we want rain tonight, but it's nice to have it open for you all to come now. And you know, I always remind you to thank the library because they give History at High Noon a home. And we're set up in this circular thing today because we're going to pass the mic around. When you have a memory to share, Dwayne will bring a microphone to you, and then you can share and maybe stand up because we want everybody to be able to hear each other. We've talked about doing neighborhood grocery stores for a long, long time, and Diana and I have talked about it, and Diane and I have talked about it a long time. And so we just said, well, let's just do it. Let's just do it. And here we are, and we've got a good crowd, and you all have memories. If you didn't live in Sturgis, you lived in a town where there was a little grocery store. I lived in Rapid City, and I grew up with little neighborhood grocery stores too. Loved that penny and loved that nickel back in those early days. So I guess I've talked a little bit about our format today, and be sure to, you know, raise your hand if you have a memory. And I think all of you do, because everywhere I've gone in the last week or so, when I've said what we're doing, everybody would have a memory. So I'm sure the room will be full of it. It'll be lots of fun. And I'm going to turn this microphone over first to Lloyd, and because he said he made lists. And oh, and I have to tell you because I might forget. I told him I had a picture of a Kelly grocery store, and then I looked at it close. It was in Faith.
I wrote down most of the stores, and I think that I've got them all listed here that were there in like 1948, 48, 49. Anyhow, starting on Junction Avenue, coming down from Rapid City, and then on the right-hand side is Bates's, and it was there, and then you come on down the street till you get right next to where Ted's repair shop, and you had Midway grocery store, which was owned by Hildebrands. And then if you go out, come in from Fort Meade on your right-hand side on Lavelle Street, as you're going west, was Dodson's grocery. And you keep on going on up the street, and then you come to was Wild Burgers at the end, and originally it was Cooper's. Then if you go on Main Street from where the old post office was, going west, was Sparks's grocery store, which my dad bought, and it was Keszler's Food Market. And then you go on up the next block, and you had what was Jones's Grocery.
Excuse me, just got to ask.
And then that became Dorn's Grocery. Across the street on the corner, as you go on up, be the corner of 2nd Street, was the Red Owl grocery store. And then if you go right there, where they're building the place down there now, and get there, which is now the Senior Citizens, that was Lindick's grocery. Then it became Benning's grocery. But if you go across the street from the Red Owl, which is where they're putting in the, what is a park or whatever it is, was March's Produce. Then if you go up here a couple blocks, you had the Spruce Street Grocery that was owned by Wilson's. The reason I mainly know that is because I used to buy candy bars on the way to school. Then if you go down First Street, you had Haley's down there on the right. And then there was two stores that a lot of people didn't know about, but if you go on out Main Street to the corner where you turn to go underneath the railroad, and Terrence lived there at one time, there was Jack's Service Station and Grocery Store. Now the, what? And then there was one other one that I bought candy at one time. Was O'Toole's West Side Grocery. And that is if you go down Main Street and you come to 6th Street, you turn right, and the house on the corner Ralph Murphy lived in, you turn to the right, you go about 10 yards past that house and turn to the right, and that grocery store sat back in there about 50, 60 feet, and it was just a little house.
That was off 7th Street.
7th Street, not 6th.
6th. I'm sorry about that, it was 6th, because it was right behind where Ralph Murphy lived.
Yeah, he lived on the corner of 7th and Main.
Ross told me it was 6th and Main. And I figured he probably knew where he lived.
We lived on 6th and Main.
Well, I'm just telling you, that's what he told me it was.
We won't argue.
So, you can get up here and tell about it if you want. But you're talking about the vacant lot on up there the next block. But he said it was 6th. That's what he told me.
It's okay. I passed.
And that's where all the grocery stores were back in that days. Now, there's quite a few grocery stores in this little town. Some of them weren't very big. Like that store wasn't very big. And neither was that Jack's, but the rest of them had a little more full line of groceries. So if you got any questions on those, I'll try to answer them. Yes, Sue.
Lloyd, I think there was one more grocery store. We lived on, they called it Main Street, but it was off the Main. And do you know where the Beelers lived? On the corner of Main and, I don't know what street that is. Anyway, they had some kind of a store in this building behind their house. And just because we lived right across
I
the street
think that's the
from it.
one we're talking about.
Is that the same one you're talking about?
Right.
I don't
Because
know, but
these
anyway,
Beelers were related to Murphy's,
Yeah.
and they got the store after O'Toole's had it. It
Yeah,
was
well-
called O'Toole's.
when I knew it, Beelers lived there, and they had the store, and it didn't have a name, except it was right across the street from me, so you know I got more
Right.
candy than you.
I know that, but anyhow, that, Ross said that his aunt or uncle, got that store from O'Toole's.
Oh, yeah, well, that's probably the same one, but I.
And
didn't
it's
ever
pretty
hear a
hard to
name-
find.
I didn't ever hear a name on it because it was just there.
It was pretty hard to find. Jack O'Shino lived right there somewhere, right beside it. When he first
Anyway,
came to town.
everything there's gone, so.
So anyhow, Sparks's Grocery, that's the one that my dad had. And now, are you ready to talk?
Sure. I'm always ready to talk. And I'm glad to see some of our former customers here. I'm going to talk about our grocery store, Doran's Grocery. And my folks purchased it from Sim Welch in 1942. And Sim Welch had purchased it from W.E. Jones, who was the grandfather of Dr. Jones. And the grocery store had been established in 1881. When we bought the store in 1942, I was 13.
but I started, you can do the math. And I started, as did my brother and sister, started to work in the store right away. But the previous summer, I had even worked at age 12 in Dave Marsh's store as a clerk. So I was already a pro at the time my parents purchased the store. And you wonder how many of the grocery stores could survive when there were so many in a rather small town. But in 1942, during the war, there was no problem with selling groceries. Everything was sold out almost as soon as it came in, and groceries were hard to get. And at that time, when food was rationed, sometimes people begged to have food that they didn't have. I don't mean they begged for the money, but they begged to have more than their ration books allowed. So everything sold out right away. The big thing I think about the small grocery stores like my parents' store was the charge account. And it wasn't unusual for people, especially in the rural area, to charge their groceries for 6 months at a time. The charge account, this is what we used instead of the computerized business that they have today. And we itemized the groceries, we added them up, and put them on the spindle. At the end of the day, we filed and at the end of the month, and added them up. One thing that was really interesting, I think, about the charge accounts was that sometimes people would come in and say, could you give us $5 and put it on our bill because we need to buy some shoes. So the grocer was kind of a banker, but didn't ever earn any interest for the money. Yeah. And at that time, I think the tax was a penny tax. Cigarettes were like 15 cents a pack. And I don't remember some of the prices. I think bread was like 11 cents a loaf, and milk maybe 19 cents a quart. And I remember one time a customer came in and he was complaining about the high cost of milk. And in his arm he had a fifth of whiskey. But he charged the milk, and I'm sure he didn't charge the whiskey. We delivered groceries. That was a big thing too. People called in. At the time we bought the store, our phone number was 12. And I know that Keszler's was 34. I remember that. And people would call in their order, and we would write it down, itemize it, and deliver it. And delivered sometimes twice a day. We had an old van, and sometimes I helped my brother deliver. One of the reasons I live in the house that I live in was Mrs. Steele owned the house, Mr. and Mrs. Steele, and she would call and say, I would like somebody to bring me a pint of cream. And so I'd get in the van and I'd take the pint of cream and go to Mrs. Steele's house, and she would have a tea party for me. And I enjoyed that so much because she had a big dining room, and I always told her how I loved it. When she died, her son Freeman rang my doorbell and said, Mother said that when she died to ask if you want the house. And I said, yes, I do. I didn't ask anybody else about it, but we got the house, and I've been there now for 55 years in that house. The hours, no stores were open on Sunday, and I don't know if that was because of a law at the time, but no stores stayed open on Sunday. However, we did stay in the store very late on Saturday night, because when the farmers and ranchers would come in on Saturdays, they would go to the evening movie. And they had purchased their groceries in the afternoon and left them there until the movie was over. So we used to wait until the movie was over, and they would come and pick up their groceries. I can't think of anything else that might be of interest to you, but if you have any questions, I'll sure be glad to try to answer them. As I said, I see some of our customers here. Yeah.
Ramona, how are the groceries brought to town? Mainly by truck or train?
Oh, the fruits and vegetables came from Deadwood. They have Twin City Fruit and Adams Grocery. And Which ones?
Pioneer?
Oh, Pioneer Fruit in Rapid City, and then the bread came from Rapid City. They would bring it down and we would check it in and mark it, and even at age 13, I knew how the markup was supposed to go. Oh, another thing, we always, when people paid their bill at the end of the month, we gave them some kind of premium. Usually it was a sack of candy, but I do have this from, the phone number on it is 12, so that had to go back 5 years. And Leona, I know you have a beautiful platter that says Doran's Grocery on it, and that must have been a Christmas premium.
She can't hear you, dear.
Oh, okay. We'll skip it then.
Yeah, we didn't have a shopping.
Tell all the stories you want.
Pardon me?
I bet we didn't have a shopping cart.
No, and when we bought the store, there was one long counter in the back of the store, and that counter consisted of many bins, which contained bulk items like rice and beans and anything that needed to be bagged up.
Did you sell fresh meat?
Yes, we had a meat counter, and that was another interesting thing during the war. There were only like 3 or 4 kinds of cold meats that were available, and one of the worst ones was called souse. Did you ever hear of that? But that was readily available, and I don't know why, but it was a really inexpensive cold meat.
Wasn't the best tasting.
No,
What was it, Ramona?
it was called souse.
What was it?
Oh, it looked like sort of like head cheese. It had a lot of gel in it. Yep.
So the store remained open until when? I mean, year-wise?
How many years?
Yeah.
My parents had it from 1942 until about 65, and then it was purchased by, so I can't remember his name, and he had it for maybe 4 or 5 years, and then it sold and it became Swede Anderson's Bar. Yeah. Oh, we had another thing that I really liked about the store. In the back room of the store was this elevator that you operated with a pulley, and we would store things down there, but you could pull the rope and go down in the basement and come back up.
Yeah, we always brought eggs in, they were part of our grocery bill.
Okay, that was another thing. People brought eggs and traded the eggs for groceries. We had to candle the eggs. Lloyd told me that he got the highest score as a certified egg candler.
Did you live upstairs?
No, we didn't. But there were 2 apartments upstairs where people lived. Yeah.
Tell me about, they talked about the candy so much. Have any of the candies from your era survived? Probably a Hershey bar, maybe.
Oh, the
No.
Hershey bars.
Paydays.
One of the things, one of the kinds of candies, I remember they were a kind of a chocolate, cone-shaped chocolate. And I know that those are available now in a catalog from Vermont Country Store, but that's the only place I've ever seen them.
So
And
was
then there
it-
were those orange peanuts, and you can get those from novelty catalogs. Yeah. Candy bars were a nickel. Oh, and that was another interesting thing about the candy bars in Bates Grocery. They always charged a penny tax on a nickel candy bar when the kids went up.
They had penny candy bars too, didn't they?
Oh, yeah, there were penny
Penny
candy
candy
bars
bars.
too, penny candy.
A lot of penny candy.
Yep.
I can remember that we also delivered whiskey.
Oh, I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
people call it Dad and we put it in their grocery order, go get it and put it in the grocery.
Did you hear what he said? That people would call the grocery store and ask him to go pick up some whiskey and deliver it with the groceries.
Did they charge it to you?
We had to charge it to them. We went and paid for it.
But
Yeah.
did you put it on their charge account then and pay at the end of the month?
Oh, isn't it? Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then another time I remember I answered the phone and this lady said she needed some vanilla right now.
Oh, I know who that was too. Oh, no, I won't tell. But her husband always informed us if she orders vanilla, don't sell it to her. It had alcohol in it.
So anyhow,
I know who it was.
she wanted it right away, and so I took it over to her, but I didn't take, I took imitation.
Oh,
And
you
I
didn't.
took it over and delivered it, went back to the store, and she called me up, she says, I want real vanilla.
So what did you do?
I took her a bottle of that, and then my dad said, we don't do that.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting, that we were instructed by her husband not to sell her vanilla. Yeah. I'll talk to you later and see if we agree.
Were people real good about, paying their bill off as they'd agreed, so that you could keep
Most
functioning?
of them were.
Most of them were, quite a few never were able to, I guess. In fact, I know one time my dad said he could retire early if he could collect some of them. Yeah. And I remember one time in the summer, a family came through, and obviously they were down on their luck, and they came in and the man said, my kids haven't had anything to eat except pop and potato chips, which really wasn't a very good choice. He said, so could I charge some groceries? And my dad said, sure. And of course, when he left, my mother said, you're not going to get any money for that. And Dad said, I know. Yeah. Yeah.
You said your grocery store wasn't open on Sundays, but those neighborhood ones were open on Sundays.
Oh,
Some of them were.
Some of the
I know,
little
my
tiny
mother
ones
used
were.
to-
Mhm,
If we
yeah,
got come the
mhm,
unexpected, she'd always send us down to Dotson's to buy a loaf of bread.
yeah.
Because most of those people lived right in the house.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Beer is such a big item in grocery stores today. Back in that era, they didn't?
No, nobody sold beer.
Okay. I recall in the mid-1950s, we lived in Aberdeen. And I have no idea what the name of the place is, I probably didn't even then, but just a ways from us, there was a little, quote, neighborhood grocery store. And they had about a 3-stool bar in there. Of course, it was 3-2 beer. And I was over 18 at that time. And you could go in there with your clean gallon jug and get a gallon of beer for 75 cents.
Oh, for goodness sakes. Yeah. No, not in our era.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, when I was on the city council, it was a convenience store in the south that applied for a beer license, and there was no reason not to grant it. So I happened to be the one that made the motion to grant it because there was no reason to deny it. And the next day when I was walking down the street, someone said, Ramona, I didn't know you were so much in favor of alcohol. I thought everybody knew that.
Most of the country stores had a beer joint along as part of the building next door to it, so they could walk from the grocery store right in to the beer.
I know Plainview had that.
Yeah, well, Eddie had
Plainview
it,
sold
Union
beer in
Center
their
had it.
store.
But I think it was City Law and Sturgis, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was a,
any type of liquor, so.
yeah.
Well, in the 20s, John Sisk had a grocery store about where Tom T's is. Remember that? They had-
Sisk's? I don't remember that.
Yeah, because I can remember.
Did you say in the 20s?
Yeah, because I can
Oh,
remember
well,
we'd
I
take
wasn't
eggs
born
in.
then.
Because we'd take eggs in there. They had stuff on the shelves, you know. And Dad would take the eggs in, and then he'd get maybe some pepper or salt or something like that. That's about the only thing you had to buy was sugar and flour. And then Bates Grocery down on the south end of town, they had a hide buyer scale hanging up there. Remember that? And a hide buyer scale is a scale that they weighed buffalo hides on when people come with buffalo hides. And then we had a slaughterhouse, and that was south of Murray Edition, up next to the hills there, probably in Hurley Edition, a slaughterhouse, and they'd butcher livestock there. And they would bring them down, and there was a butcher shop, well, where the bank is now, where the Fruth Hotel was on the south side of the Fruth Hotel, there was a butcher shop there, and they would butcher up the beef or pork, and then they deliver it to the grocery stores. Anybody remember that? So.
I remember the name Sisk, but I don't remember the store.
Yeah.
Ramona, that was Bovie's butcher shop. Bovie's, it was in the back of the Fruth Hotel in the county.
The butcher shop back of the Fruth Hotel, yeah. Yeah, I do remember that.
I know, I was talking to John Lindy's daughter, Louise Rogers, and she said that they used to get the meat from that little butcher shop there for their meat.
That was on 2nd Street, wasn't it? Down where the senior citizen center is?
Yeah,
Yep.
Lindy's Grocery, yeah.
Yeah.
Did any of the stores in this area have a creamery with them?
Pardon me?
Creamery. In the wall where it was, the store, there's 2 of them had creameries.
There's a
And
creamery
we
on
sold
Lozelle
cream
Street.
to them. Yeah. And see, then they'd pick it, they test the cream, and then they take it and put it on the railroad, ship it out, see.
I don't know that any of the Sturgis stores did. We had, as we said, 2 creameries, yeah. But when my dad had the store out at Stoneville,
Right.
we had a creamery. And we used to, my dad used to test cream, and then we'd take it to Newell.
We lived 30 miles out of Wall, north of Wall, and so when we had a 5-gallon can of cream, we'd take it down, and the mail carrier would take it back.
Oh, yeah.
And then he'd bring the next day, bring the can back.
Yeah.
I think all the country stores had creameries
Okay.
practically.
With regard to the creameries, we had the Midway after Mary sold it to Dad and Mom. And it was not very long before then they sold out. But anyhow, do you remember Hooper's? Didn't they have a dairy here? And I think all of the
Hoopers was out
stores.
by the
Right,
me.
yeah. But I think everybody bought their milk and cream from them.
Well, they had Rainbow
And there was Rainbow, right,
down
yeah,
here,
yeah. And they did their own pasteurizing and everything. and
but
had
then
ice cream.
Brown Swift and the other was delivered to town here.
But Brown Swiss was out of town, it wasn't in our
But
town.
Peterson's
they
had
were
a,
down.
Peterson's had a creamery, H.S. Peterson,
That was the one that you're talking about down in Lozelle.
yeah.
And then John Sisk had a creamery about where, it was on Main Street. Well, let's see, where Loman's was, and then the Keeney's Cafe, right in there, they had a little creamery. And I
Okay.
think that was before the LaBelle down on Lozelle Street. And the people that run the LaBelle Creamery was Johnson's. I can remember Johnson's and the boys, Homer Johnson and they was one of our better basketball players in the
Yeah.
early days.
Autos,
Yeah, Otto, yeah,
Dean.
yeah. I couldn't remember his first name. Yeah. So we had, but I don't think the creameries were at the same time. They were, there wasn't 2 creameries at the same time.
There was one here on 2nd Street, in about the middle of the block.
That was the Rainbow Milk Company, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was Rainbow, just a creamery, it wasn't a milk company. They
Okay,
used to take cream there all the time.
okay.
Actually, the doorway is still there. What's behind it, I don't know.
Ramona, my dad always talked about what a treat oranges were at Christmas. What fruits could you get throughout the year? And
Well, oranges and apples and bananas. And in fact, that was an interesting thing. The bananas came on a big thing that you hung up. And then we had a banana knife that we cut off the bunch of bananas for people.
but nothing more exotic than those 3? Did you ever get
I know
a
in the summer
pineapple?
we had grapes and cherries.
Wow.
And we always had lettuce and cabbage. But yeah, oranges and apples were plentiful. Usually we had 2 kinds of apples, Jonathan and Winesap. Right?
and delicious, always had delicious.
Oh, yeah, delicious, sure.
I gotta say, it was
Sure.
always delicious apple.
Ramona, I just want to comment on you saying that the grocery store was the bank. I grew up in Sturgis, and my dad, every night he'd go to Haley, we always went to Haley's, and he'd go to Haley's and he'd call Mom, use their phone, called Mom, she told him what he wanted, he got the groceries and came home. And then on Wednesday, because Wednesday was payday at the sawmill, he would go to Haley's, and Haley's would cash his check and take out what he owed for the week of the groceries.
Just half.
Yeah, with most of it probably. Gave him back whatever, you know, the change from the check, and then it'd start over again. You know, so that's how. But on Wednesday, for us kids, because it was payday, he always would buy 1 sack of candy. So Wednesday became candy night.
Yeah.
Maybe they gave it to him, just thought about it.
Yeah.
I remember Kool-Aid. Our kids grew up on Kool-Aid. What did we know? But Kool-Aid was 6 for a quarter. Yeah, the kitchen floor was sticky all summer.
Does anybody remember the grocery store that was where the senior citizens at now?
That was Lindick's. Lindick's, and then it became Bennick's. Mhm.
Ramona, when Tracy Hamlet had his store, wasn't that originally Lindick's?
I'm sorry.
Tracy Hamlet, they had a grocery store for a while. Wasn't that where Lindick's?
Well, yeah, Louise Rogers.
Right, but she
was
was
a
a
Lindick.
She married a Hamlet,
Mhm.
Tracy. Well, okay, there was Lindick's, and then you say Bennings. Was it in the meantime Hamlet's, or was
Hamlet was in between.
it? Was it in between?
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Question I got is, I still wonder, how did you handle ice cream? You know, I used to go to a store that was 20 miles north of Wall, and they always had ice cream.
We didn't have ice cream in our store.
Okay.
We had it at Stoneville though, which is
Okay.
really interesting.
Okay, that's what.
Because we had, you know, those ice cream refrigerators where you put the big container down in and then you reach down and dipped it out. But we had refrigerated ice cream out at Stoneville, which is pretty unusual.
Yeah, bananas were always shipped in this box that's kind of triangle-like,
Yeah.
and they were kind of a grayish brown, and I had shredded paper in.
Have that shred up paper.
Yeah.
Did you have ice cream in your store?
Yes.
No, we didn't.
Yeah,
Midway
we had
had
ice cream, but it was in a freezer that,
Chocolate?
yeah.
Loman's had a confectionery.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember.
And they made their ice cream, that was really good. 15 cents for 3 dips. Huh? Yeah, yep.
Well, we didn't have bulk ice cream, we had, they were brick.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Lloyd said that they didn't dip their ice cream, they had brick ice cream.
Another thing that John Lindick's grocery store, he had a table setting in there. Oh, it was about probably 4 feet around, and had a big chunk of cheese in there. The cheese was about 8 inches thick and about 3 feet around. You're just sitting there, and people would order some cheese, and you'd go over there and chop a chunk off and weigh it. And
Oh, we did that in our store too. It came in a wheel. We called it a wheel of cheese.
This is a great big.
Big cheddar.
Couldn't get by with that nowadays.
No.
I have several memories of the grocery store since I grew up here. The first one I thought of was when the groceries came to Marsh's, we went to get 2 things. One was bubble gum and the other one was bananas. And you had to chew your bubble gum until the next time bubble gum came. I don't think that was awful. I remember one time Carol Harvey said to me, "Oh, yuck, that's terrible." Well, I didn't have any more bubble gum, so I had to. And the other thing was the same thing that Lloyd mentioned. We'd go purposely down through street to get to school so we could stop and get candy.
Yeah,
And we
well-
didn't always have to pay a nickel. Sometimes we could pay a penny, and sometimes we got 2 things for a penny. So really, no wonder I grew up. And the third thing is, we lived near Wildburger store, but I don't remember much about their store. But when we moved to Junction Avenue, Bates's Grocery became a lifesaver for my mother because people were always coming to town from out in the country. So as soon as she'd see them coming, she would send me to the grocery store. And we always had, we called it minced ham, now they call it bologna, but it was good. I don't even eat it today, but I ate that. Because it was fresh, I guess they cut it right off.
We we had a slicer, we sliced it. It came in a long tube and people would say, they'd either tell us they wanted it by weight or that they wanted 15 slices and
Well, the other
thick or
thing
thin.
that we used to get,
Yeah, they wanted,
I just can't find them anymore, but they used to have these big things of cookies, and in there were 2 kinds of cookies. Sally Ann or something with all that frosting on top, what's about that thick. And the other one was that marshmallow chocolate one with the cherry in the middle. And you just can't find these things anymore, but I don't know what we would have done if they hadn't been available because, you know, it just, and Bates's, I know, they said when they died, they were really rich. And I can see why, because they lived in that little room back there. And like you said, they charged a penny extra. But it was fun. It was a fun part of my growing up, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. But, you know, when you've been here as long as I have, these things are just good memories.
oh, yeah, Bates's grocery store was always fun for the kids to go to. Yeah. This doesn't have anything to do with selling groceries, but Mrs. Bates had a 55 Pontiac, a green Pontiac. I know because I bought it at an auction. But the garage sat right on the sidewalk. And when she wanted to get in it, she would go and look down the street to see if any cars were coming. And if there weren't, then she'd run and get in the car and back out. No, she wasn't. No. But she was a nice lady, though.
Yeah.
Does anybody remember, my memory is maybe a little fuzzy, I don't know, but Marsh's Grocery, eventually they had like a milk bar where you could get sodas and
Yes,
malts
they
and whatnot.
did,
Does
yeah.
anybody remember that?
Yeah,
You
they
do,
did,
yeah.
Well, some of them. Yeah, but
So I'm remembering correctly that they did have a milk bar. Well, anyway, the little Marsh child or grandchild or something, he was in kindergarten up at the academy. And Bishop McCarty would always come to kindergarten graduation, you know. And you remember Bishop McCarty. Everybody remembers him. He was, you know, very jolly, wonderful fellow. Anyway, he would take the children up on his knee during this graduation exercise. He'd talk about it. And anyway, this little Marsh kid, he said, yeah, well, we go down to the bar, you know, and then we have the, and the mother was out in the audience just cringing. A milk bar, child, a milk bar, not bar. But anyway, I always remember that. And then another memory I have of the Midway groceries when we had it. We bought it from Mary Hildebrand. Dad had been sheriff for 4 years and term limited it out. And so he thought, oh, this grocery store, this would be the very thing. Well, anybody who knew my dad would know, no, you are not suited to be a grocer at all. But, you know, he had big ideas. Well, Mom ended up running the grocery store while he went off and did feats of daring do. But anyhow, I remember that the candy company would sometimes have, like at Valentine's Day or Christmas time, they'd have these lovely boxes that you could buy. And you remember when we used to get candy in boxes that you could use for a jewelry box later on. Well, she had thought, well, you know, I don't know, yeah, we'll have one of these in stock because somebody will want it. Upstairs there was a couple who were kind of in dire straits, you know, not too flush. And the guy was all excited. This particular event was coming up, and he wanted to give his wife this beautiful gift. So he made payments on it, and Mom said, you know, you go ahead and take it and so forth. The next day, the dear girl, oh, bless her heart, she came down and she said, Mom, she said, Mrs. Aga, we can't afford this. I need to just get them. I haven't taken anything out of it. Please give us the money back. And Mom just looked at her and she said, sweetheart, your husband, it meant so much to him to give you this gift. He saved and he made payments on it. You must accept it from him. And she talked the girl into
It's a nice story.
It is a nice story.
That's good. I can remember the Midway grocery store because it was on our way to school. We lived on East Sherman. And I remember one time I had just gotten my weekly allowance and it was a quarter. And my girlfriend was with me and I said, okay, we'll stop on the way to school and you can buy some candy. And we always bought penny candy. And I thought that's what she was gonna buy, but she knew I had a quarter. So she reached in and she got a big boogie and it was about this long for a nickel.
Did you mention who had Spruce's, the little grocery store on Spruce Street?
Yeah, Wilson. Spruce Creek Grocery.
I'm
Of
sorry.
course, had all those baseball cards.
Yeah, a lot of candy.
Bought them for the gum.
A lot of candy.
There must be some more.
More memories.
Did you have anything that was preserved in barrels? Because where I came from, we had a mercantile. and I know
Vinegar. We sold vinegar from a barrel. Mm-hmm.
Because we bought lutefisk. Oh.
Yep.
In the wintertime.
Yeah, they had the pump on the barrel, and we sold the vinegar from the barrel. We also sold dill pickles from a big container.
Yeah, big.
Yeah. They were a nickel for a big pickle. Yeah, Joe?
I always had plenty of money to spend because I had a shoe shine stand there in my dad's barber shop. So I was always flush. But I also had a horse. And the little grocery stores around town that had the little ring in the sidewalk out front where you can tie your horse up. You all remember those places? They're the ones that got most of my money because I rode around town to these different grocery stores on my horse. And I needed a place to tie him up. And so I know Spruce Street was handy for us and they had a little ring in the sidewalk there. So they did pretty well off my shoe shine money.
What did you get paid for shining shoes?
It was when I started, it was a dime. And
What
if
year?
you,
What year?
let's see, I started in 1945, shining shoes, and we got a dime, and it just, and it just depended on like boots and what have you that you did clear at the top. They were, of course, more. But if you did a really nice job or was really cute at that age, you were just a little guy and you were really cute, you could get a quarter out of most of those things. And on Saturday night, of course, when all the ranchers were in town and they had spent the day sitting at the different bars around town, we stayed open, the barbershop stayed open late, like the rest of the stores. And it wasn't unusual to get $1 for a shoe shine. The drunker they were, the better the price. One of the best things that you had to do was you had to watch. Most everybody wore white socks in those days, believe it or not.
Oh, yeah.
And so if you got shoe polish on their socks, you probably weren't going to get that quarter. That's for sure.
Well, $1 was big money.
Oh yeah. There was lots of times on Wednesday or something going on in town that I made more money shining shoes than my dad did cutting hair.
Yeah, you were the rich kid on the block.
I had all kinds of money to
Yeah.
spend. I don't know what the heck happened to it. I think the candy store.
Which barber's shop?
Before my folks brought the store, I mentioned that I
Midway.
worked at Dave
Midway.
Marsh's store in the
Midway
summer.
Barber Shop.
And I got $15 a week. And that was a lot of money for a 12-year-old.
This is more about Archie than about the grocery stores, and I've heard later that he did this for a lot of kids. At the time, I thought Helen and I were special. But one Christmas, Archie, I guess we were 3 and 4 or something like that. He took, Dick came and got us in the grocery truck that looked like the PT Cruisers now, and took us downtown, and they took us out to eat, which was really, we never went out to eat. And then they took us shopping, and I think we each got a dress and a coat, and then a big doll. I mean, this was little rubber doll days, but Archie's dolls were large, and I don't know why he gave them to us, he should have given them to Mother, because we never got to play with them. You know, they set up on the cupboard and we got to play with them on Sunday, if we stayed on our beds to play with them, but we do still have them today. And I guess that was pretty common for Haley's to do that for kids. And I don't know why he picked us out of 9. I don't know what our brothers and sisters thought of this, you know, Helen and I got this great Christmas, but I understand he did it for a lot of kids.
Probably because you paid your bill every Wednesday.
It was a big bill, let's face it.
Yeah.
I have something that I think it's kind of interesting about the demise of the little stores. Eventually they, you know, gave way to supermarkets and the fact that people could drive to Rapid City and whatnot to the bigger markets and so on and so forth. And I think that was about the time we had the Midway, it was in that decline time. Well, Katie Dodson, you remember Katie Dodson? You remember she had long fingernails? Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, that woman had long fingernails. Lovely, and they never seemed to break. But she was, I don't know how she did a cash register with them, but she did. Anyway, she and Mom were friends. And in those little stores, you didn't always have, because you had all this stuff on the charge accounts, you didn't always have cash to pay the Nash Finch or the Twin, you know, whatever they were, Twin City Fruit, whatever. And so you'd order, maybe Katie would order a case of such and such, Mom would order a case of such and such, and then they would split that order. Because they each had just little bitty stores. They didn't have to have a whole bunch on the shelves, just enough to make sure that everybody had what they wanted to. And they would get together when it was the time for the Nash Finch man to come around, and they'd decide, okay, you order this, I'll order this, and then we'd split, and then that's kind of how they survived.
Well, people didn't go out of town to shop either.
No. But we're more mobile now, and that was the transition time when people were becoming more mobile, I think. And the little stores weren't as important as they once had been.
I wanted to say, where I was out Wall, you know, we were 30 miles from town. If we needed groceries, we'd either call the store in Wall, and they'd put it up for us and put a charge, or we'd call the store in Creighton if we figured to have it. And then the postman would deliver it. He'd probably charge a quarter or 50 cents for that. And you'd watch, and we lived about a half mile from the mailbox, but we could see when he'd come, and then we'd go over there and pick it up.
Oh, the post office delivered it.
Yeah, the postman. They had a rural carrier, right?
Yeah.
And he's a contracted.
Oh.
And he would pick up the cream and all that kind of stuff and groceries. If you had baby chicks that come in on the railroad, he'd go bring them up. See? And another thing I think is talking about, you know, the baseball cards. If you had some of the baseball cards right now, they're probably worth a couple $100.
Sure.
Yeah.
Did any of your local stores handle dry goods too? I was raised in a small farming community, and we had everything from the groceries to the school supplies to clothes. I mean, we could get everything all in one little place.
We didn't have any churches, I don't think.
No, I don't think so. At Stoneville, we had clothing, and I think maybe that was because it was the time when people were, they called it on relief, and there was clothing that came in, and it was practically free, I think. And of course, there was the 50-pound flour sack that people made their clothes from too, the cloths.
I grew up north of Newell, and our main store was N.M. Bratton's. And they had a bakery, they handled eggs, you bought groceries, they had furniture, they had dry goods, you could buy clothes there, material there. And they'd bring in our eggs and they would candle them, and that would go towards the grocery store. But didn't have cream. Ole Nisha had a creamery, and the money from the creamery and the money from the eggs would buy our groceries.
Yeah, I think Bratton's store was a wonderful store.
Oh, yeah, it was.
For years and years. They had the upstairs where they had the clothing. Downstairs they had an ice cream parlor. When we lived at Stoneville, my dad used to, I think that's where he took the cream.
Could be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And
we had a creamery there.
so I remember Bratton's store. It was really a nice store for
Yep.
years.
the only thing was, not the only thing, but the thing that really interested me when I was a kid, the cashier, you would give her the money and there was a setup so this money would go up to the cashier, clear up.
Oh, those vacuum tubes.
And she'd make the change and everything would come back down again.
Yeah. Pennies in Sturgis had that also. Yeah. They had that for a long time. Leona can't hear me, but Leona used to operate that.
She tells stories about it all the time.
Yeah.
When you're talking about bulk, but the bulk store, sometimes it wasn't always the cleanest in the world. I remember my dad bought some cookies one time, some ginger snaps, at one of the stores here in town. I think it was Marsh's, but I don't know for sure. We got it home and there was a lot of mouse dropping.
Well, the cookies came in those square box containers, like from Nabisco, and they had a glass top. But if the top was off, then of course it would be open to.
Well, I know they just scooped them out in a bag or something to weigh them.
Yeah. And we didn't use plastic gloves then either.
No. Well, we just blew the things off and ate the cookies.
We didn't have any germs back then.
No extra charge for that.
What we paid for the ounces of, I suppose.
Oh dear. It's really fun to hear all the stories.
My mom and dad lived close to the Cooper store on Lozelle, and a lot of you knew my dad, Orrin Hardenbrook. He raised quarter horses, but he's also a preacher. He started a church at Fair Point and all around. I have a nephew that's 6 years younger than me, and after he got to be about 7 or 8, he stayed with my dad every summer, dad and mom. Called him Grandpa Quarter Horse. Well, as he got around 11 or 12, he wanted to be a cowboy a little better, act more like cowboys. So one day he went down to the Cooper store, bought a sack of beech nut, and he could chew it, I guess, for a while, but when Mama was putting his clothes, I was in the Navy at the time, she was putting his clean clothes in his drawers, she found that beech nut sack back in there. Ronnie told me that was the worst whipping he ever got in his life. And he said the next time he went to the Cooper store, the lady said, "I will sell you no more tobacco."
Oh, yeah. Beech Nut, Spark Plug, Bull Durham. Bull Durham was a big seller in the 1940s. I think it was a nickel a bag. Yep. And then you got those papers that came in a little orange carton. I think those were used later for other things, though.
Bull Durham in to make a cigarette.
Yeah.
My little story is about the Cooper store too. And when my two older boys were little, one day I went to the store and I had Danny with me, and he gave him some candy. And I said, "What do you say?" And he said, "I have a little brother at home." You know, there's another store we haven't mentioned, and that was the Bargain Barn. It came later, but it was pretty important for a while in town too. I think it was Clef Lynn and Hobernet. Yeah, and somebody else was in on that, but
Kitty.
Yeah, right. It was a good store.
Didn't that morph into something that's down here now?
I think it was where the office supply store is now. Yeah.
I can't get anybody to remember that my favorite little candy bar, not really a candy bar, was a chocolate covered cream chocolate thing. And it was shaped like an upside down bun cake. It was about that big around, and it was called Pippin. Does anybody remember that? Well, it was really good. I grew up in Rapid City, so I bought that at a grocery store on West Boulevard called Euchre's Grocery. And that's where we went for our candy bars, or Mother would send me for in between grocery shopping.
The ones that really did well, like Rapid Raymond, ones that were like a half a block from the schoolhouse.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So I think that we've had a very good time today. I thank you all for coming and for sharing your memories and making this a nice, successful, fun day. So thank you for coming. We'll see you next month.